Warning: some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Allen Obi, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, man. How are you?
I'm all right. Look here, man. We need to talk.
Let's do it.
Uh, all right. So your, I'll tell you what caught my attention
hmm
is these interviews that you've been doing, and they always have the hashtag Kevin Samuels started this conversation.
hmm
Um, and I don't know how many episodes, but you're like 30 episodes or something like that. Maybe it's more than that now.
74.
74. Okay.
hmm
And always interesting conversations, always sort of probing. It seems like the right combination of holding a person to, account for what it is that they're saying, but then also allowing them to, you know, to speak their truth,
hmm
because that's people have their own truth, right?
hmm
Um, and so it makes it very interesting. Now, with that title, Kevin Samuel started this conversation. I mean, he started a conversation or became the most well-known figure for carrying on conversations uh, with respect to, in particular, relationships in the black community, dysfunction in those relationships.
hmm
And this conversation that's been continued on, seems to be resonating not just on YouTube, but I'm sure you probably aware of this recent clip that you see from a sermon that T.D. Jakes just gave,
Yeah.
which seems to be influenced by many of the things that you hear in the Black Manosphere. Um, so, can you talk a little bit about Kevin Samuels with respect to your sort of how you found out about him?
Yeah.
Why did you want to do a series of interviews with that moniker?
Yeah. Um, so I found Kevin Samuels prior to average at best. He I didn't know who he was, but I found a video of this well-dressed black man sitting in what seemed to be like a BMW or Mercedes. It was like, nice leather seats. And I later found out that was Kevin Samuels, but he was talking about leaving a corporate event that he had just attended, as a representative of his company, the company he was working for at the time. And he was talking about how he looked around and he saw affluent white people, white men, white women. He looked around and also saw affluent black women. And other than himself and maybe one or two other guys and the wait staff, there were no black men there. Right.
Yeah.
So I found Kevin Samuels because he did that video entitled "You Belong There," and essentially his message was these black women are doing the damn thing. They're at the governor's ball. They're at the American Heart Association fundraisers. They're doing really cool stuff. They're at art galleries, and if we want to reclaim our rightful place in our community, if we want to build our community, we need to step it up collectively as black men. So that's how I became acquainted with Kevin Samuels, and I didn't even know it. Then Average at Best went viral, and I found myself having a lot of conversations in my everyday life around some of the points around that video and around some of his other videos as well, because I started We Need to Talk in 2013 when I was in college, and I was kind of known as the We Need to Talk guy, right? So a lot of people knew that Alan was going to have an interesting perspective, or at the very least, he was going to have something to say, right? So um, from those conversations, I decided why not formalize this, turn on a camera, and elaborate on some of these things, maybe in a different way, take a different approach, and see if we can, reach some middle ground of understanding, because to a large degree, Kevin Samuels became black men's anger translator when he began to talk to women. So I just wanted to kind of add to that conversation. And from a YouTube standpoint, the name Kevin Samuels was very, it put you in a certain space. So I decided to name the series Kevin Samuels Started This Conversation, and just have it go on indefinitely, because ultimately I'm trying to model how to have deep, insightful, productive conversations that are not, antagonistic.
Right. Now, uh, one other video that I saw you in, you were doing a live.
Mhm.
I think it was a live stream.
Yeah.
It was an interview with a young black feminist. Um, and I'm trying to think. Well, actually, she wasn't just a feminist; she was a divester.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That was my first
And
live, actually,
oh,
ever.
okay.
Hmm.
So, what was interesting about that conversation is it- BGS did he did like a review on that interview,
Hmm.
and he pointed out, I thought, well, that she didn't really know what she was talking about,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And she was kind of stepping into a lot of holes, and she wasn't probably the best representative of the divester position,
Hmm.
although I think she made the general arguments.
Hmm.
One thing that uh, I'm rather concerned about is there's actually been a call from that divester community to selectively delete babies if they're black men, right?
Yeah. Cynthia
So
G.
if that's right, and actually she's not the only one saying this, and
Hmm.
there's a number of them that are saying this. It's hard to imagine that they have so fully embraced neo-Nazi talking points in the
Hmm.
way that they characterize black men, and in the way that they are justifying this, you know, exodus of Blackistan, as
Hmm.
as they put it.
Yeah.
So, what are some of your thoughts about what potentially caused folks from that community to? How did they get there? I mean, what is pushing folks to that sort of extreme? What do you think?
Yeah. So, like I said, that was my very first stream. And ironically, my favorite part of the stream wasn't actually my conversation with the young lady. My favorite part of the stream was the conversations with black men that followed, right? Because I typically leave time for people to come up and unpack and uh, you know air their grievances, and add context to the greater conversation. And one particular guy came up. Shout out to him. His name's Philly Kid. I think 416, something like that. Some variation of numbers. And he said that his very first words were, "I understand why she's like that." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He said, "I grew up in the same neighborhood that she grew up in. So when she characterizes black men a certain way, the Dusties, uh, the primary face of violence and bigotry and the whole nine. When she characterizes us that way, from her um, viewpoint, from where she's coming from, she's accurate, right? Now she's accurate when she's limiting her perspective to where she's coming from, but we grew up. That part of Philly is very poor. It's
Mm.
abject poverty, and people are doing their best to make it. And we know, if we study psychology, scarcity reduces your IQ. Scarcity reduces your ability to think abstractly. Scarcity, it reduces your ability to empathize, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people operating in scarcity are not good people, whatever goodness is. So if she's basing her understanding of black men from that.
Thanks for watching my video so far. There's all kinds of ways that you can support below. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Also, become a channel member where you'll get access to all of the archived videos. Now, back to the video.
Men from that, then I get it, right? And I thought that was powerful because very often we start with the symptoms, not the disease. So when you combine that with, you know, I've had the privilege to grow up with and know a lot of women in my life, and the saying "hell hath no fury like a woman scorned" is absolutely accurate. Like, a woman is willing to go to lengths in an attempt for retribution or vendetta that even men, the most hardened man, is not willing to go. So when you combine trauma, you combine female nature, I think that's what you get, right? Like when you listen to a lot of divestors actually tell their stories, they're coming from places of either poverty, they're coming from toxic situations with black men, they're coming from being the primary sufferer of colorism. Like it's no surprise the majority of divestors tend to be dark-skinned, non-ambiguous black women. And in a white supremacist power structure, the dark-skinned, non-ambiguous black woman is lower on the beauty totem pole than her curly hair, more exotic, whatever that means, counterpart. So you throw all that in a bowl and you get women who are essentially anarchists, right? Because to your point, when you investigate their talking points, it doesn't stand up to scrutiny. And one of the things that stood out to me, and I pointed it out during our conversation, she had a Freudian slip. She said, "I probably won't end up with a black man." And I was like, "I thought you divested." But if you are still probably, it means there's a possibility.
Right, she's still pining for black men. Yeah, one thing that's interesting is that a lot of the venom seems to come from they really want a black man.
Mm-hmm.
They want the let me do that better. They want the black man of their choosing,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we know that there are a lot of black men that would pretty much take any black woman.
That's right.
Okay, but those black men might not be the desirable black men.
Come on.
Okay, and that's a different issue than all black men are, ain't ish, and all black men are like the ones that I chose that were no good. There's something different there. I mean, we always hear this, 80% of men are basically invisible.
Yes, absolutely. That's a fact. That is an absolute fact.
Yeah, and so, and even black men that have the kind of characteristics that would make them good providers, stable, to be able to not just make a good income, but to be able to constantly climb up in the corporate structure to make more money as they go on. The qualities that make that kind of black man are not the kind of qualities that it seems that our women prioritize.
Well, I think. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead. You can go ahead and right there.
No. So I think to your point, our women have not been raised to prioritize stability. Our women have not been raised to prioritize provision. Our women have been raised to prioritize excitement and opulence. right? So with that being said, when we consider the fact that an uncomfortable number of our children, men and women, or future men and women, are growing up either without any male supervision altogether, or without appropriate male supervision.
Right.
They are essentially raised by the hyperbole of Hollywood, right?
Mhm.
And there's this idea that there's going to be this millionaire guy who runs a Fortune 500 company, but is also the life of the party and has all the time in the world to fly me around the world and do all kinds of stuff. So you combine that with a world where women no longer, at scale, women no longer need men for provision in the ways that their grandmothers did. You know, women have the jobs, they have the degrees and the whole nine. If you are not, and to your point again, uh, women date across and up the social hierarchy, right? So if you're not opulence, the manifestation of opulence, if you're not the charismatic thug who does poetry and is intellectual and can fight and does, if you're not all those things, I'd rather be single. Like that's the disposition currently of our women. Now, I've been trying to reel that in and say that, oh, okay, male energy and a man's role in your life or the life of your children is simply not provision, right? Like we've condensed it and oversimplified it to just provision, but it's more.
Mm.
And if we continue to trivialize the role of who our current boys are going to grow up to be, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? We tell these little boys they ain't shit like their father wasn't shit. What do you think they're going to grow up to be or aspire to be? They're going to grow up to aspire to be rappers and the whole nine, not nuclear physicists.
Right. Let's take one of the sort of prototypical qualities that our women seem to desire.
Sure.
So physical fitness is definitely one of them.
Absolutely.
Now, of course, uh, there are characteristics that you can't control, stuff like height.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but if you just talk about physical fitness, if you're going to have a six pack, then you're probably not going to be disproportionately. You're not going to be uh, uh, particularly exciting. The reason for that is because
Your
in
discipline.
order to have, yes, right. That's right. That's right. You
Yeah.
got to go to the
Yeah.
gym. You got to manage your diet. You can't just be
Mm-hmm.
doing frivolous stuff. You know, hey, I want to just go do this. You're too regimented. Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's how you look like this,
Come
right?
on.
So a lot of the things that seem to be prioritized, even if you would give them to a particular woman, it's likely that she still wouldn't be satisfied with that,
Sure. Sure.
given the current dynamics,
Sure.
because because of what it takes to maintain all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing also is just this idea that um, one of the reasons why you don't usually see all of these qualities that you discussed in the same person.
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody's
Sure.
like that.
Yeah.
Jesus was not even like that, right?
It's a
Uh,
walking contradiction.
that's right. It's because you
Yeah.
have to spend time in on whatever it is
Yeah.
to develop it to a certain level. And so the tendency, if you're an intellectual, if you're studious, if you're excel in academics, then you're probably not going to be whatever the opposing thing to that is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's just how it works because you have to decide how you spend your time. So, uh, if if a guy is particularly gifted in a particular way, it's likely that he has sacrificed
Come on.
something, to be able to do that. And
Yes.
so that's why it's not really possible even
Mm-hmm.
to embody all of these things. And one thing that I find quite interesting is black men seem to be the only one only
We're held to
ones that
this.
have to reach this ridiculous level.
Yeah,
Whereas it seems to
yeah,
me that white women, uh, Hispanic women, Asian women, they just kind of like, okay, I'm looking for these qualities, and if I get those qualities, I'm just going to deal with whatever else is there.
yeah,
That's not
yeah.
what we get.
And the what's particularly insidious about this is that even if you are that guy, you will still be trivialized by our women. Even if you are that guy, it's gonna be the
Yeah.
who does he think he is? And oh, he think he's somebody. Oh, his little business. Oh, his little, his little company or his little car. You will still be minimized, right? So
Yeah.
I think about kids, like what is the incentive for young boys to want to be this? Now, with that being said, to add a different dimension, I think, one of the things that led to this, and this actually is outside of my typical white supremacy frame. I think what led to this is that, when it comes to sexual selection, typically women are doing it, right? Like men, for the most part, we will have sex with anything. For the
Yeah.
most part, right? We're not as
Yeah.
sexually selective because the stakes aren't as high for us. With that being said, because women have sexual access to men at their beck and call, they've never actually had to develop a working understanding of male pathology.
Nope.
Outside of, I show a little nipple, I show a little ass, he's going to want to sleep with me. Women have never actually had the dialogue with the inner workings of manhood. With that being said, they don't realize that the male disposition tends to be myopic. It tends to be one track minded. It tends to be, I'm focused on this, tunnel vision, and this is all I'm doing. Right. And it yields great results. Like when we see some of the things men have built, invented, obsessed over, from artists to engineers and the whole nine throughout history, there's the necessity of tunnel vision is clear. So with that being said, if a man is doing, and to your point, if he is doing his 10,000 hours, um, there tends to really not be the time, or there tends to not be time to also become this and also become this and also become this, because we hyper fixate and hyper focus on becoming a master or a student or a mentee of this thing, and this is what I want and this is what I'm going for. So because women don't understand that, they expect us to be able to be everything, because typically they are a people call it
Right.
salad, word salad, right? They are a
Mhm.
combination, a heterogeneous mix of a bunch of different things. She's this and this and this. And since I don't have a working understanding of men, the best I can do is project my understanding of women on men. So essentially, women are looking for uh, uh, 6 foot tall male women with bass in their voice.
Yeah.
That's the truth. That's the truth.
So okay. So the white supremacy thing.
Yeah.
Um, Now I saw your interview. I didn't see the whole thing, but on Bernard Riley's channel
Sure.
recently,
Yeah.
and um, especially when he opened the panel, there were some folks that had some criticisms,
Hmm.
uh, of what your approach is, and one even asked, so how are you measuring your results? Are you
Yeah.
measuring it in marriages? Are you this kind of thing? Which, uh, and shout out to Little Big Nate. I tend to dig him,
Hmm.
but I don't know that that's. I don't know how to quantify. I wouldn't know how to quantify it in
Hmm.
in that way. And actually, that might be the least. That might be the worst way to quantify what it is that you're actually doing, because
Sure.
that's limiting it to I mean we want more marriages, we want
Sure.
more healthy relationships. Okay, yeah, that's good, but it would be hard to trace what actually caused that. And one thing that I would say even about Kevin is, though people were calling, frequently to tell him, hey, you saved my marriage, or because I, adopted your perspective, it
Yeah.
facilitated this relationship, X, Y, and Z. It's still hard to create a straight line between
Sure.
what it is that Kevin was saying and them actually getting married or staying in their
Sure.
marriage.
Sure.
Okay. But one thing I was thinking about in that, and I would have tried to jump on the panel. I couldn't do it because I was driving or something. I can't remember what I was doing. But what is the intersection between citing white supremacy as the primary cause and black people taking responsibility for the state of the black community? It wasn't our fault, but it's our responsibility, right? What do you perceive as the intersection between those? Because when you get questioned by multiple people at the same time, it's hard to actually get that
Articulate an answer.
complete, that complete thought out. Because I don't think that what you're saying is, none of it is our responsibility. Somebody needs to come in here and fix this for us because we didn't create this issue because of the white boogeyman. It doesn't seem to me that that's what you're saying. Can you? So if you understand my question.
Sure. Yeah. I'll pick up from there. So the first thing I want to say is, I don't think we can understate what it is that Kevin Samuels actually did, right? And to your point, I think the reason why people were calling saying you saved my marriage or you helped me reframe my thinking around relationship is because Kevin Samuels was the first time in probably recorded history in the 21st century where, number one, black men had the opportunity to articulate our grievances with our women. Number two, women were held to task in their wants. Okay, you want a man who makes this amount of money. What percentage of men make that amount of money? Are you in a comparable percentage of women for that minute percentage of men? And if you are not, how are you becoming competitive for that minute, small percentage of men that you claim you want? Do you actually want that? Or do you just like the optics? Do you like the facade of, oh, my man makes $500,000 a year? Or do you understand what comes with it? Do you understand the politics of dealing with other rich men's wives? Do you understand the politics of the country club? Do you understand the politics of this man might not be at our kids' dance recitals all the time? He might not be at every single game. That was the first time women had to sit and actually do the math, right? And think to themselves, number one, do I actually want this? And number two, does the math make sense? Does one income and me literally just sitting back and living my soft life, does this equal the type of lifestyle that I've envisioned for myself? Or do I need to maybe rethink some things, scale back, consider something closer to a 50-50 arrangement with a man who's a good father and a good character, good. I think that's what was missing in the critiques of Kevin Samuels, because I think ultimately that's what he was trying to do. With that being said, to your next question with white supremacy. So, it's often stated that after slavery, we were married at a high rate. It's often stated that in the 70s, in the 80s, it started kind of going down, but it was higher definitely than it is right now. And I think multiple things are happening. I think overall marriage rates are going down, right? Like as women have gained independence, as women are now have aspirations that were traditionally masculine, they don't see the utility in locking themselves, chaining themselves to a man for the duration of their lives. So that's happening at scale. But I think particularly in our community, we don't talk enough about how our perpetual dysfunction is literally the fuel that maintains the Western world, right? I can go all the way back to slavery, but that's I think we've beat that we've beat that up. Let's start with the Berlin Conference. Let's start with vagrancy laws after the Civil War. Let's start with private prisons today that rely on literally a head count. So there's literally a financial incentive for Black men to be dysfunctional to feed the private prison industrial complex, right? So if I'm a white guy and I own stock in, I think it's I can't remember, CB something, of course I want the rap music to go out. Of course I want kids growing up in single mother households. Of course I want kids being taught by teachers who could give a crap in decrepit neighborhoods, because I know there's a straight line between that and more heads in my prison. Now, the reason why I always bring that up is because it's very easy for us to misframe this conversation as Black men destroy the Black community, Black women destroy the Black community. And it ends up being this chicken or the egg thing, when the reality is the Black community is kept and sustained in a perpetual state of dysfunction in order to continue to fuel white interest globally. I tell people all the time, like we we talk about the coltan mines in the Congo, right? They're exploiting child labor, and companies like Apple and Facebook and Microsoft have branded themselves as these pure savior-esque companies. But the reality is, if they paid those kids a fair wage, if they decided to not exploit the continent, if they decided to not exploit that country, your phone would be 4 to 5 times more expensive than it is. Right? So even, and this is the part that's heartbreaking, it's such an insidious system that even the oppressed now have a vested interest in the continuation of our exploitation. So all I've been trying to do is say, oh no, it's not her, she's a symptom. Oh no, it's not him, he's a symptom. It's that.
Right. So where's the place? Because okay, so I'm a third party guy. Matter of fact, a couple of weeks ago, I was a presenter at the Freedom Fest, which is a big libertarian conference and kind of free thinkers and whatnot. And me, Larry Sharp, and T.K. Coleman did a panel called Three Black Libertarians Walk Into a Bar. Well, I'm sorry, Three Black Libertarian Men Walk Into a Bar.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And and it was a really good conversation. I fashioned myself a black nationalist, libertarian, somewhat conservative, somewhat liberal on certain social programs which historically have been shown to actually help black people. So the straight sort of Democrat or Republican thing has not been something that I've been a fan of.
Same.
I call it the
Pepsi and Coke.
Oh yeah. I call it right. I call it the binary fallacy.
Yeah.
And of course, just because it is the only other quote unquote viable option,
sure,
doesn't mean that it's actually the answer. And by continuing to play that game, all we've done is keep all the same people in power. And the Dems and Republicans are jointly culpable for where we are.
Absolutely.
And in particular, where black people are. And I would argue that black men and boys, I interviewed Minister Japp, and this is several months ago, and our talk was called but are the but are the straight free thinking? Oh, I'm sorry, but is the straight free thinking black man protected?
Come on.
And of course, the answer to that question is no. The straight free thinking black man is not protected. But when you talk in those kinds of terms, people want to pick at it. Somebody made a comment. He says, "Is free thinking another way to say homophobic?" You know,
Yeah.
This kind of stuff. But it's like, dude,
Yeah.
why does everything have to be about that? I'm just trying to address issues that face black men and boys, and you always want to try to pile all this other stuff in that nobody was even talking about.
Right.
Okay, but where was I going? But the whole
Libertarian.
two-party
Yeah.
thing, yeah. But the whole two-party thing, I think, has been inherently problematic.
Absolutely.
Where do you find yourself politically? Because on the one hand, I hear certain things that you say that if I was to clip that, I think you'd be characterized as a progressive, right? But then other things, if I snapshot it, you definitely be portrayed more as like a conservative or at least somebody that was more free thinking. So where do you find yourself in the sort of political paradigm?
So one of the best things I've ever done, because I've always been obsessed with dialogue and the power of dialogue, and I don't know if that's because I'm a foreigner. Therefore, like when I came to this country, I was trying to assimilate and understand the nuances of culture and the complexities of people. But because of that, I always find myself uh, digesting content that I disagree with, right?
Yeah.
And turns out that's one of the tactics of a good debater, right? Like you should also be able to articulate the opposing position.
Yes.
So with that being said, there's a lot of stuff that the Democrats say, particularly when it comes to um, let me call it moral ethics. That makes sense, right? They attempt to draw lines, and it's like people are like this because of this. Chicago has a lot of crime, but it also has a lot of unemployment. So are we going to address the unemployment, or are we just going to pathologize black men in Chicago, right? So that stuff makes sense. However, when, for instance, recently Mark Lamont Hill said that men can have babies, that is categorically false. It's absurd. It doesn't make sense, right? And it's like you can be so accommodating that you begin to compromise objectivity, right?
Yeah.
So that's my biggest critique of the Democratic Party. So I do not consider myself Democratic. Um, I like I liken Democrats to missionaries, which typically are the first wave, the soft hand of an invading force, right? Um,
Uh,
now with Republicans, um, Republicans tend to be. I live in the South, right? So Republicans, people who identify with Republicans, tend to be very dismissive of, again, those connections, right? Like it's easier to think black men are inherently criminal than black men are severely unemployed. Like that the easy answer is
yeah.
typically what people like. And it also, considering the fact that history was taught to us incorrectly, it also kind of corroborates that, that those stories, right? It's like, of course that makes sense, because I have to pathologize this man for his suffering to be okay with me. Like it's part of that cognitive dissonance that the white people have had to adopt to justify their callous behavior and exploitation of people, right? So that makes sense. So for me, it's about what makes sense. And unfortunately, we have mortgaged ourselves wholesale to the Democratic Party. Therefore, the Democratic Party takes us for granted. Therefore, the Republican Party thinks there's no need to even try. So we get stuck in this position of, and obviously, um, we're not lobbying like our Asian brothers or our LGBTQ brothers.
Nope.
So, we're stuck in this position where we're an afterthought. Where the Democrats think they got us, the Republicans think it's a waste of time. I'm about whatever party we need to work with to exact the outcomes, not the pretty flowers and the pageantry of progress, but the outcomes that we want to see.
Yeah.
For the time being, for that the duration of that project or sprint, I'm gonna use a tech term. I'm with this party. I mess with y'all. Y'all are cool, but it's
Yeah.
business. Now again, and I think this is a consequence of us being a matriarchy. We think emotionally first. We don't think pragmatically first. We think, who makes me feel good, and that's why we're in the predicament we are.
Yep. And yeah, I've made that point frequently, and that is, black folks need to become more agenda
Come on.
and policy oriented
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
less party specific. I
Yes.
don't care what the party is. I care what the policy is.
Mhm.
And so I did this. I did a video. Let's see here. It was one of my impromptu streams. BGS calls them car thunder, because I'm usually in my car. So usually after I drop my son off, I'm sitting in front of the gym. I'm talking for a while, then I go in the gym. And one of them was celebrating first blacks presupposes that the racial integrationists were right. Celebrating first blacks presupposes that the racial integrationists were right. The point there is, we are very much susceptible to symbolism.
Yes.
Okay? We'll take a symbol. Now, that symbol will not have any impact on the general lifestyle of a black person. It has zero impact on that. But a few black folks are able to get, a payday. Okay? We gave you first black vice president. We gave you the first, first black female vice president. First black female on the Supreme Court. We give you the first black president. We give you all of the, all right? So, hey, look, we're giving you all this stuff, but none of that stuff has had any impact on the black community. In particular, has had none or has actually had a negative impact on black men and boys. Okay? So that's the kind of stuff that actually matters to me. Now, I said that, presupposes that the racial integrationists were right. I don't think that the racial integrationists were right. I think they were wrong. Okay? And this is why I think they were wrong. First of all, many of the early, black nationalists, people like Jesse Jackson, he was a black nationalist, but he saw that he could make more money by becoming a racial integrationist. And so he became a racial integrationist, got his payday. It screwed us over, but he did better, right? And you see this sort of cycle of a lot of the early civil rights leaders that were more black nationalists, how they would slowly sort of convert into these more racial integrationists. And one of the issues with the racial integration is that it was not done as a both directions kind of scenario. The way that it was done is, we're going to take black folks and put them out here in your communities. They didn't take white folks and put them in the black community. That's not what they did, right? And so even the way that it was done condescends to the black people,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And to Malcolm X's point about us needing to create real political capital of our own, real
Yeah.
economic power, so that when we sit across the table, we are as equals.
Yes.
And then the further point that he makes is that, and as equals, when you sit across the table, the idea of integration never comes up because it's not necessary. It's not
Mm-hmm.
necessary. Now, obviously, you want to eliminate and remove laws that make it illegal for people to interact with people
Mm-hmm.
based on immutable characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
But this sort of forcing integration, I think, is at the heart of something that has really been destructive to the black community. What are your thoughts on anything that I said? I said a lot of stuff, but anything that you want to jump in, you got it.
I am with you 100,000%. Integration is a lie, right?
Hmm.
Like if you look at demographic maps of where people live in urban areas, and you could say it's a result of redlining, but 80% of black people live around other black people.
Yep.
80% of white people live around other white people.
Yep.
Somebody made the joke, the most segregated day and time is 12 p.m. Sunday morning,
Yep.
right? You go to a white church, it's 90% white people. Black church, damn near 99% black people.
Yep.
You go to any cafeteria at public schools, the same remains. You go to any college PWI campus, the same
Yep.
remains. The white kids do their own programs somewhere, the black kids do their own programs somewhere, right? So again, the reality is, and I think you can make a good argument that these are some of the vestiges of, um, slavery and segregation and the whole nine. But the reality remains that our country is segregated, but we enjoy none of the benefits of it as black people, right? And what it actually did, we talk about, oh, we think white man's ice is colder. Well, it's because we didn't invest in ours, right? It took our focus away from building our own infrastructure by black people for black people to simply patronizing white people.
Yep. And of course, what began that, of course, wasn't really our fault.
Mm-hmm.
There was state-sanctioned terror against our financial institutions, Black
Absolutely,
Wall Street,
absolutely,
and there was
absolutely.
dozens of Black Wall Streets.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
black audacity is, especially black heterosexual male audacity, is the biggest threat to the white patriarchy. Black heterosexual male there's a distinction now in the Southern Law Poverty Center called black identity extremist. And they are more vigilant in pursuing that than they've ever been in pursuing the KKK, the skinheads, or any other white vocal hate group.
nope.
But black people who have the audacity to say that we can do for ourselves and we're going to defend ourselves by any means necessary are public enemy number one. And I wonder why.
Yeah. So one of the reasons that these conversations, I think, are of critical importance, conversations with, especially with respect to black community, black relationships, the dysfunction, the way that we sort of don't really relate to each other very well, um, is because look, I'm married.
Mm-hmm.
I have an 8-year-old son who's about to turn 9, and I used to think I've got a couple buddies that have like all daughters, and
I
I
got
would
one.
joke to them. All right, I
Yeah,
used to
yeah.
joke. I used to joke with them all the time, saying, "Man, I cannot have a daughter because I don't want to have to go to jail."
Listen.
Because I don't want to be
Listen.
fighting.
Yeah, yeah.
And the thing is, though, as I've become more aware of actually what's going on and the dynamics that uniquely black men and boys face,
Mm.
I actually have come to believe that raising a black boy today, I think is
It'll be more
harder.
challenging.
I mean, potentially, I mean, there's more things that you have
Sure.
to protect from.
Sure.
I mean, you've got obviously there's the history of bad interaction with law enforcement. There is stereotyping, and much of which is stoked, kept alive by our women in the way that they talk about us.
Sure.
I mean, because it's one thing. So it's one thing if, some other folks they just have certain characteristics of a group that they don't really interact with. But if it's the women from your community pointing a finger at you and saying they are all scumbags, then that's hard to overcome, because it's like it's as if they're going to believe that they're getting, the inside scoop. Oh, this is the real,
Right.
the real information about this.
Right.
So it makes it really difficult to overcome that. But some of the statistics associated with education. I'm an academic.
Mm.
I'm a music professor. I'm the director of jazz studies at the institution. It's it's PWI. It's Big Ten, and is a diminishing number of black male students. Each year it seems like it's diminishing. And then not only that, you have this dynamic where there are 20,000 fewer, and actually this number is probably closer to 30,000 now, because this is an old number, but 20,000 fewer black men in the academy than black females. And when I say in the academy, I'm talking about professors. 20,000 fewer, right? But when you look at the policies that these institutions put forth, the diversity and inclusion policies, whenever I hear that phrase, diversity and inclusion, in the back of my head, it's code for screw the black guy.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Right? Especially the straight, free-thinking black guy.
Come on.
Right? So the way that they have this thing situated with the double minority credit for being black and a female, the whole Title IX business, and how that changed the whole game. Affirmative action, we know, was actually designed for black men, but then when Title IX got put in place, now we see that actually 84% of the recipients of affirmative action were white women. And the reason that they did not change that, so look, man, when you enact a policy, you see what happens as a result of that policy. And rather than doing something to change that, you double down on it.
Sure.
All that does is tell me that was the result that you're comfortable with.
Absolutely.
Okay? And meanwhile, black men and boys are doing worse and worse. The whole Black Lives Matter thing, right? So you create all of this momentum based on the mutilated dead bodies of black men, straight black men for the most part. And then you get everybody all up in arms. The 24-hour news cycle where new footage is being released, every couple days, and you're playing the same clip for 3 weeks, and everybody has seen this horrific. It's like what is it? It's like mutilation porn or something.
Mm-hmm,
You
mm-hmm.
know, it's just, and people just can't turn their eyes away from it. You get everybody amped up based on that, and then it's a bait and switch where they
Right.
actually end up serving what they actually wanted, the agenda that they was really important to them, and then
Right.
we're actually doing worse.
Yep. Yep.
And I actually have I have a perspective on this, showing all this footage of black men being killed, unarmed black men being killed by police, because there's a black professor at one of the it was like University of Virginia or something, and he did a study on by percentages, by population, interaction with law enforcement. And what
Mhm.
he actually found is that black men are least likely, as unarmed, being unarmed, to actually be killed by police than whites.
Mm.
However, he also showed that black men are susceptible to much more, uh, what am I saying? Brutality,
Mm. Mm.
right?
Mm.
So we're
Well,
brutalized more.
quick question: as a percentage or as a number? I
Well,
want to
it's
understand.
so it was based on the population numbers. So in
Okay.
other words, he was interested in showing percentages of the population as opposed to just raw numbers.
Okay.
So
Okay.
he
Okay.
actually was able to show that a lower percentage, given the amount of interaction with the police.
Mm-hmm,
Now that's
mm-hmm.
another that's something that you could dig into there a little
Sure.
bit more,
Sure.
because we
Sure.
get
Yeah.
stopped more
Over
often and all of
policed.
that
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But uh, but the reason that footage of white folks getting killed by police, that's not the stuff that goes in the 24-hour news cycle, because I believe that the I believe it to be an artifact, a byproduct, an undertone, an overtone, remnants of when the dead black male's body would be on the porch of the master,
Come on.
sitting there for days on end. It's a way to assert
Mm-hmm.
dominance.
Oh yeah.
Uh, I was watching a Dr. Tiasan Johnson, shout out to him,
Shout out to him. Yeah.
and and he showed some footage where it was a divestors channel. It was on YouTube. So it was somebody that had a lot of subscribers too,
Mm-hmm.
and they had somebody come up and they started to say how sexually aroused and turned on
Oh
they got.
yeah, I talked about that in one of my streams.
Right.
Yeah, I
By
talked about
by
it with
black
Nathan. Yeah,
Yeah, by a black man being manhandled
by the
by the
police. Yeah,
police. That's masculine. Oh,
yeah,
like this kind of thing.
yeah.
Um yeah. So so there's a lot of stuff that
Yeah.
um that I think gets unpacked
Mm-hmm,
in the black manosphere in particular,
mm-hmm,
and maybe adjacent sort of locales within the space,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
um, that aren't talked about. Not with
Yeah,
regularity, not with assertiveness, not with
yeah.
persistence, not trying to dig into what's actually going on. And so I find this space to be of critical importance. It's the only
Absolutely,
time in my life. It's the only time in my life when this last couple years has been the only time in my life where uh, there was so much of this conversation
absolutely,
that was going on. So
absolutely,
what do you think? So so obviously you think that's important.
absolutely. It's vital. It's
Yeah.
vital.
Uh, Otherwise, it seems like we're just going to keep doing the same stuff that we've been doing.
Yeah. One of the things I'm excited about right now, I don't know if it's going to happen, but I DM'd Dr. Joy Dugree on
Mm.
LinkedIn, and she responded. So
Oh,
that's a step, right? And for the people who may be watching this and they don't know who she is, she obviously is a black woman. She wrote a book entitled Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome, and then she went on to give several talks around the concept. And one of the things that I thought was brilliant, she um, she pulled up a picture, common picture of a black male lynching, right? Like it was, the black man hanging or being burned, and like the picture kind of fixated on him, right? And she made the point that very often when we dialogue around the trauma of black people, we fixate on the black people. Oh, how must he feel? How must his family feel? So the lens blurs outside of the focus of the man hanging or the man burning, right?
Mhm.
And she said, what if we zoomed out? So she literally zoomed out and she said, what do you see? Um, the idea is that you would see hateful, mean mob of brolic white men who you will not replace us, the blood and soil type of dudes. And she said, if you look into this audience, this black and white picture, you see mothers, you see
Kids.
fathers, you see children, you see the
Yeah.
elderly, and they are not fazed by the suffering or the death of this black man hanging or burning. Now, she made the point, she said, listen, if I brought up a puppy on stage and I stomped that puppy to death, the vast majority of you would probably need therapy for the rest of your life. She said, why is it that you can empathize more with a puppy being killed than a black man being killed?
Hmm.
And she made the point that as much as we study black pathology as a consequence of slavery, we don't talk enough about white pathology as a consequence of slavery, and the mechanisms, external and internal mechanisms that they had to put in place to justify, like I said earlier, and to create that, you know, almost like permanent cognitive dissonance around black suffering and black exploitation, because that's the only way they could sleep at night, right? Like there's a there's a movie by Nate Parker, also entitled "The Birth of a Nation," not the original one, but like the one about Nat Turner. And one of the things that I thought, I don't know if the director did this intentionally or not, but I thought it was brilliant. So Nat grew up with the boy who would later be his slave master. And on their crusades to other plantations to preach the gospel in an attempt to make the slaves docile,
Mhm.
he and his ex-friend slave master would take these journeys to these different plantations for him to preach. What I thought was interesting is on every single one of their journeys, the slave master would fall asleep. Now, again, I don't know if it was intentional, but for me, it symbolized a good white man's attempt to disassociate himself with what was happening. Because on some level, like on a human level, you know this is messed up. You know this ain't right. And literally in
Right.
the movie, he had to sleep to, slept when they leave, he will wake up during the sermon. Right. And I thought that was brilliant. But again, um, to your point about like the porn aspect of it, um, white people need the image of the criminal black man, need the image of the roadkill black man to continue to um, exploit the economic benefit of our death and our um, exploitation, right? Like they
Mhm.
need to see us as less than that puppy that was stomped out on stage. They
Right.
need to be able to pathologize our life. They need to think we're inherently criminal as opposed to unemployed. They need to think our women, for instance, even during slavery, were Jezebels. Their genitals were just more pronounced and more active than the average woman. So me raping her is okay. They need to believe in all these things to be able to sleep well at night. And I don't think we talk enough about that, because that was a mechanism created, whether consciously or subconsciously, to disassociate themselves from what they were doing. But they need these stories.
You know, minstrel shows.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and of course, Hollywood is, you know, they're basically, it's the same thing. It's
Yeah.
maybe more subtle, which in some ways, subtlety actually can be a more effective way to achieve your goal.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Because if something is overt, then it's like, oh, I can't.
Yeah.
I shouldn't
Yeah.
dig that.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's subtle, you can be like, well, it's all right, you know.
Yeah. Listen, as much as I talk shit about the proverbial white man, one thing I cannot take away from him, or it, as a collective, is that they are PR geniuses. When it comes to branding, public relations, and marketing, it gets no better than white people. And part of what I mean by that is they know how to shift the lens. You know that I read somewhere that every war has been fought over God, right? So it's either literal God or gold, oil, and drugs, right? Right. And what better way to say, oh, we need to go save those people, right? We need to go save those people from the big bad boogie, whoever is there. But deep down, is I want to exploit it, but I need a reason to make it make sense to the people and maintain the brand. Like there's a there's a meme going around on Facebook. I don't know if you're familiar with the show The Boys.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's the meme is like America brands itself as Superman, but it's really Homelander. Like,
Yep.
you know, and that's the reality. But branding PR geniuses, we can't take that away from them.
Yeah. So you said early in our conversation that when you were in college, that's when you started the We Need to Talk channel. Um,
Well, it didn't
so
start as a channel. It started as a nonprofit. And then the
okay,
channel, yeah, the channel came about in like 2015. But what you see now started in November.
right.
Yeah.
So um, so what is your discipline? You went to college. What is your discipline?
Marketing.
Marketing. Okay.
Marketing, yeah.
And yeah, so you have a daughter. Or, I
Mhm.
mean, what maybe tell me about how you grew up and
Mhm.
family and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So I grew up in a Nigerian house in America, right? So for all intents and purposes, inside our house we were Nigerian, outside we were black. We came to this country when I was 8 years old. I'm 29 now, so I've been here 21 years. That's wild to even think. But we lived in New York for a short period of time. We moved down to the South. Like most Africans, I was completely unaware of the context that I was being thrown into, and I was subject to the same idea that white people embrace me more than my own people, right? And it wasn't actually until I started understanding historical context that I was able to really put things in the proper context. And since college, moving forward, I've gained more information, and that's kind of where my current disposition comes from. But initially, um, I was like most everybody else, particularly Africans. I was programmed to pedestalize white people.
Now, this getting along with white people or them getting along with you better or whatever, that sort of thing that you were saying, is that associated? Does it seem to be associated with interests that you had, maybe pursuing things from an intellectual perspective, a discipline that you found particularly interesting? What were dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, no, all the above. It started with when the kids found out I was from Africa. The white kids met me with curiosity. The black kids met me with insult. Right now, I understand that in context. Right, but at the time, as a kid, I was like, "What the hell? Like, white people are being nicer to me." Right. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, again, the image of the pseudo thug, drug dealing street guy was the popular depiction of black men, and I didn't fit that. I tried to, right, because I was still yearning for acceptance, because black people are the epitome of style and interesting, right? So I still
Mm-hmm.
try to be that and appeal to that. But again, um, there was a certain latitude that white people gave you in humanness, in your human expression. You could be this, and that. Um, and again, it wasn't until I understood these things in context that I began to deconstruct this. But I even say till this day, black people are impossible to love unless you love black people. Like we've been programmed to represent our own dysfunction. We've been programmed to remind each other
Yeah.
of our
Yeah.
traumas, right? So unless you have committed yourself to loving black people, it's very easy to be like, "Why the freak is that waitress? Her customer service so terrible. Why is she talking down to me? Why is he like this? Why does this dude want to fight?" But again, if you understand, oh, we're supposed to be like this. There's a different
Right.
there's a different approach. But unfortunately, the vast majority of us, particularly Africans, never actually get to that point. We simply get educated and we become doctors and lawyers and the whole nine. But being able to start framing these things properly, outside of simply um, pathologizing ourselves, we don't necessarily do that. And that's where I would like to be useful.
So, uh, so you're Nigerian.
Hmm.
Um, I have a show uh, each week. Well, a couple shows each week with Ike Ogiamian,
Hmm.
and Ike's Nigerian, and we have some uh, pretty interesting conversations. He seems to be able to, and you also, to be able to talk on issues related to the black community without me feeling uncomfortable. Okay? Now,
Right.
and what I mean by that is you have a reverence and a respect of the issues,
Hmm.
uh, and you talk about them in detail. You understand them well enough. You're educated about those issues, um, but you also make sure people know that you're Nigerian.
Hmm.
Like that. It's almost like. So it's yeah. I just think that's not everybody can do that. I think
Hmm.
it takes a certain kind of skill, uh, to do that.
Yeah.
The term black has an interesting sort of uh, not really etymology. It's kind of a made up term, but I suppose we can say etymology.
Sure.
When relating to race, right?
Hmm.
So initially, when it was used black, it was used to exclusively describe those that we would call FBA, foundational Black Americans, right?
Sure.
Or African Americans, or African, what is it? American descendants of slavery. It was that. But now, American descendants of slavery, that seems to be a little more ambiguous.
Yeah.
And so
Because
is African American.
Because I think, and I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry, but I think
that's okay.
it died because a lot of the issues that the FBAs were trying to bring up also included issues with Caribbeans, and Caribbeans are also African descendants of slaves. So we had to make an extra distinction to make that clear.
Yeah. And the politicians have done, I think, a masterful job of exploiting the ambiguity, because when they have, even in a conversation that is addressing things like reparations, when they use the term black there, obviously what we're talking about is FBA. But then they'll continue to use the term in a way, and there's no, we don't know what they're saying. Well, we know what they're implying, but then they can also, plausible deniability. They can also try to act like they didn't mean that by saying this term, right? And some black folks, some FBA are sensitive, extra sensitive about people that are not FBA calling themselves black. And I don't know how useful that is in common interaction, especially when you can you can partner up to try to accomplish more, right? But I also sort of understand it, given the way that the politicians have tried to exploit the ambiguity with related to that. Kamala Harris is an example of someone that is not FBA, but in the term, in them calling her the first black, female vice president, they are exploiting the ambiguity there with the terminology, because this was supposed to be one
or
of
Obama.
These. Yeah, it was supposed to be one of these first blacks. It was supposed to be a symbol for FBA, for the people that are owed something because of the way that this country has, profited on slavery and the aftermath of slavery. So they want to try to take advantage of that ambiguity. So if you could talk a little bit about some of that stuff associated with that. I know that's kind of a
so I was privileged to have a conversation. I did a live with Omowale Africa, and fantastic conversation. Now his name is Omowale Africa because he renamed himself after Malcolm X's given name, but he's a foundational Black American. He's from Philly. He traces his roots all the way back to a plantation in the South. He's a foundational Black American, and he despises the distinction, right? And similar to him, I understand the distinction because, unfortunately, like I said earlier, Africans who come over here tend to be undereducated on the context. And because they're uneducated about the context, they seem to have or tend to have the same white supremacist talking points. You can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. If you just work hard, blah, 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 blah. Now, with that being said, they tend to stand against things like reparations, which is a foundational, pun intended, debate and argument and goal of American descendants of slaves, right? Yeah. And when you study the history, it's impossible to stand against that. Like even the arguments of, well, people will squander it on Cadillacs, that's their birthright. Like that's where I'm at with it. That's their birth. If I don't care if every Black person gives their money right back to the white man, they deserve to have that money. They are owed. This is not a handout. This is not um, 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 uh, uh, a gift. These are wages owed, right?
Yep.
And I think, unfortunately, we frame these things incorrectly. We frame it as a stimulus or a gift. It's wages owned. It's back taxes. It's back paid. Like they are owed this money. But again, with unfortunately a lot of non-FBAs being undereducated of the history and feeling like since I was able to come over here, I didn't speak the language and I was able to make something of myself. Why is it that you who've been here this whole time weren't able to do anything? Now, on the face, that is a good argument. But when you investigate it and when you put it in context, it falls apart, right? So I think that is the anger of the FBA movement, particularly like the Tariq Nasheeds, right? That is the anger of it. And then typically when you see people on the media that, to your point, are propped up by the white power structure as representing the best of blackness, and they're speaking against things that would be in the black best interest, things like reparations, or they're the Trump supporters and whatever the case may be, the Candace Owens and the people who simply just rebuke. When you investigate, oh, she's Caribbean, oh, he's Nigerian, oh, he's Ghanaian, oh, so these people are not for us. They just look like us, but they're not for us. And they aren't even paying homage to the fact that their black ass wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for the work of our forefathers. They aren't paying homage to the fact that their black ass wouldn't be able to achieve any of these things if the father of gynecology didn't experiment on black female slaves. If our great grandfathers didn't literally build the White House, they're not paying homage to that fact, but they come over here and they have the audacity, the unmitigated goal to talk about some shit that they don't really know, and talk about it in a way that minimizes who we are and what we did for them. Like one of the things I was privileged to learn, and this goes into like my Pan Africanist leaning. Our histories are intimately linked, and I don't think we understand that, right? So in 69, I believe, my numbers might be wrong. It's either 67 or 69. There was a war in Nigeria called the Biafran Wars. It was the biggest civil war in our country. And essentially what happened is my people, the Igbos, the southeastern people of Nigeria, we wanted to create our own country called Biafra. Essentially because not only were we being killed by the majority power, we were also essentially second class citizens in our own given country, Nigeria. Because again, black people didn't draw the borders, white people did. And in that attempt, obviously, we created a flag. Most people don't know that the Biafran flag is literally Marcus Garvey's Pan-African flag with the sun in the middle. We were inspired by what was happening here. Now, here's what's even more interesting. Marcus Garvey is a Jamaican man. Marcus Garvey is a Jamaican man who came to the United States, New York, established networks around the country, networks so powerful. I was watching a documentary about the Garveyites, and a lady said that her great great grandfather, he worked as a janitor for white people during the day. She said that my great great grandfather, was excited to come home and put on his Garvey regalia, even if he wasn't going anywhere, because for that little bit of time, he got to feel like a man. Marcus Garvey, a Jamaican man, came to the United States and inspired the black men here with audacity. Black men were able to stand up straight. The Garveyite movement inspired the Nation of Islam. Literally, Malcolm X's parents were Garveyites. Literally, a lot of our civil rights leaders, a lot of the influencers were in communication with the Kwame Nkrumahs, with the Mandelas, they were talking to each other. Literally, like I said, our flag was inspired by yours. But again, we try to, oh, it's me and you and you and you and you, not understanding that that's what the white power structure wants: divide and conquer. Africa shouldn't be as many countries as it is, but it's kept that way because it's easier to exploit. If we keep them bickering amongst themselves, we just come in, slide in, and take what we need to take. So again, I understand the FBA movement. I've been trying to articulate the position of an African who pays reverence to what you guys have literally done for us. The fact that I'm here, the fact that I have the audacity that I have, is because of African Americans. The fact that I have the following that I have is because of African Americans, right? And if I'm the only one, I'm willing to say categorically that African Americans have inspired the black world with an audacity that wouldn't exist if it wasn't for you guys. And I just want to pay homage to that, and I just want to give back to that.
Yeah, well, that's appreciate you saying that. So I just got a couple more questions for you.
Sure, sure.
Uh, so, so the first question is, it's okay. So this will have two parts. Okay, and
Yeah.
often is the case that one of these questions will be directly related to the other one. Um, so I have a playlist on my YouTube channel called Blue Pill Testimonials,
Hmm.
and it's a collection of stories. Uh, you know, I was simping pretty hard. To me,
The
to
90s was
me,
a
yeah,
simp time. I
yeah,
understand.
yeah. It was heavy simping, heavy
Yeah,
simping,
yeah,
and
yeah.
just kind of retracing just stuff that if I had known then what I know now,
Right, right.
that kind of thing. So
Mm.
that's part of the question, and it could be related to this sort of your sort of red pill awakening,
Yeah.
and so and what I mean by that is it doesn't necessarily for some people it's not like a singular event. It happens over a process of events,
Mm.
and but for some people it was this one girl I dated her, and I said to
Yeah.
myself, I'm not going to let myself get in this situation again, and I need
Mm.
to hedge against that X, Y, and Z. And then they discovered maybe the manosphere or something, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So, what you got for me?
Yeah, yeah. So what's ironic about that? I've been familiar with the terms red pill, blue pill, pink pill, purple pill, but I've only recently watched The Matrix. Like I watched the all three all three movies like maybe 2 months ago, right? Like the
Right,
entirety.
right.
Like up until then, I'd only seen clips, and
Mm-hmm.
um, I think the metaphor of Morpheus allowing Neo to either stay in the Matrix or see the real world was interesting. But I also think the other character, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, who actually preferred the Matrix. He took the red pill quite all right, but he missed the Matrix. Like he got tired of eating slop, and he missed the fabricated steak and stuff, and then he turned against the
Oh yeah.
team. I thought that was interesting as well. And I say that to say that a part of me misses the magic of women are these are
Sugar
these
and spice and everything
stainless,
nice.
yes sir, are these stainless, if you do them right they'll do you right, and I kind of miss that, I'll be honest with you. So for me, the red pilling, it's mainly for me how to look at the world generally, right? Like it is. So
Right.
I don't just look at it when it comes to women. I look at it as, oh crap, I thought reality was like this. It's actually like this. Oh, I thought white people were good and missionaries, and no, they're not. And so I kind of been baby stepped by my curiosities into like a perpetual state of suspicion. that's what that's what I'll call it. But as far as like my female red pilling, in middle school when I was obviously a kid, but not socially aware, not there was a mixed girl that literally the long hair she developed before everybody else, gorgeous.
She was
Man,
drinking
I
milk.
was upset. And listen to me, I was obsessed about this girl. She was a year younger than me, so I think I saw her for the first time in seventh grade. She was in sixth grade. Obviously, I couldn't talk to her. I was, I'm saying I was a little, Now you fast forward, in like my senior year of high school, my cousin essentially like messaged her on my behalf and forced our introduction. Like then the next day at school, I had to talk to her. I remember I used to listen to there's a J. Cole song called Dreams. And I used to
Mm.
listen to this song every day on the way to on the way to school on the bus, right? In anticipation of seeing this. So that's how bad I was like, man, this is the girl of my dreams, and she is good. Like that was the song, right? Now, fast forward, I go off to college, and obviously she's still in high school, but our relationship kind of fell apart primarily because I learned all that glitters is not gold. Everything I thought she was not. Everything that this is when I started learning about female trauma. This is when I
Mm.
started learning about just because she looked good don't mean she hasn't been through shit. This is when I started learning about like what you think women are doing sexually. That's not what they're doing. So like I'm so thankful for that experience because it allowed me to begin to see women as people. And for the blue pill community, I think that is where we failed because we have so idealized and prematurely pedestalized women that we are unable to or unwilling to, I would even say unwilling to, see them as people. And I think that's why we fail because they can sense that because in response, they know they can never live up to our image of them. And they're put off by the proposition of trying.
One thing I think that's interesting is we do it differently. So there's and there's like a dehumanization
Mm-hmm.
aspect of what it is that you're saying, right?
Absolutely.
When
Absolutely.
you are pedestalizing, you are elevating them beyond
Mm-hmm.
humanity,
You're
right?
almost
So
deifying
it's
them. Yeah.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And for men, it seems that often is the case that we are dehumanized, but in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one of the things I hear people in the space refer to frequently is this sort of, uh, you know, our value is not who we are as people; it's
Mm-hmm.
what we can do for you,
Come on.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And a pastor friend of mine, he was my pastor when I was in college, actually, Joel Brooks. I interviewed him a couple times on this same series, Conversations with Dr. Thunder. And he would frequently say that we are not human doings, we're human beings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that is true. But in this world, it is often hard to see yourself as valuable just because you exist when the whole world is only valuing you based on what is it that you can do for them,
That's right.
you know? And so it's a different issue, but it is the center of it is that whole humanity thing.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, seeing someone as a person. This is a person. Yeah, that's interesting. And,
Absolutely.
and here's and then here's my other question, and that is just about, and there are different views on this. Shout out to Ramil Amir, who I've frequently uh, collaborated with. He was part of my panel show called Case Closed, which is a 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time show on Sundays, where we discuss topical stuff. It's an all-star panel. And Ramil, who infamously or famously, however you want to say it,
Right.
will not allow females on his platform. They have to pay him to get to be on his platform, and he won't
Really?
interview
Wow.
females. Nothing, right? And the reason that he does that is because he has this pretty hard and fast rule that he thinks that pretty much women in the space is a negative thing. As far as women having large platforms, sort of carrying the water, as it were, speaking the same talking points, saying things from our perspective, he is very suspicious of that. He thinks it's a money grab almost all the time. And now I will admit that at times it can be hard for me to understand why a woman would want to say some of the things that the guys are saying in this space. Like, what is the incentive? Why would you want to say this? How does this benefit you? Because ultimately people do things in a longevity. They do things on the long haul. In the long haul, stuff that benefits them. And at some point, you're going to see who they actually are. And maybe they are being who they are all along. But I suppose you're not really going to know until it's been happening for a while.
Then. Yeah, that's right.
So there's a number of what has been dubbed pick-me's.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the space. Chantel Simone, who I've collaborated with frequently, and people like Melanie King, and who has become more controversial, especially after Kevin passed away.
Right.
But there's a number of them. Danica Marie. There's a list of them. Femme Sapien. What is it? Real Femme Sapien.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. There's a number.
Six the Goddess. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is your general, and you don't have to single anybody out, but
Sure.
what is your sort of general thought about women in the space? Do you
Yeah. I fully understand the suspicion. And so much so we had I did a panel, I moderated a panel on Courtney Michelle's page, like around that conversation. And then during my conversation with Obsidian, because apparently he's changed his tune over the years, right? And now he is more so encouraging of more women in the space. For me,
he's even said that he thinks that women basically should control the space.
Oh no, he's tripping.
Which is very,
he's tripping. He's tripping completely. For me, it's, and this has kind of been, and I'm not saying anything I haven't said directly to Courtney. For me, I want to see women talking to women. I think it's important for men to feel seen by women, but all these things that you're regurgitating, are you telling it to your cohort? Are you putting them on game? Because everybody isn't going to get a Melanie King, right? But how are you moving the needle for your delegation to be in partnership with us? Because ultimately, looking at this from a, Black perspective, an Afrocentric perspective, there's an us, there's not a we versus them or we or them. There is an us. However, I think it's important for men to have sacred spaces. It's important for women to have sacred spaces. It's important to center objectivity and dialogue and to center productivity and dialogue, right? So I think the male and female spaces should be in dialogue, but I do still think there should be male and female spaces because, unfortunately,
Separate but equal.
yeah, right. But unfortunately, the reason why we see the Melanie Kings, I remember when I first started posting videos around like December, it would show me who else are your subscribers following, and Melanie King was one of the names that popped up. Melanie King had about 19,000
Yeah.
when I
She
screenshotted
got a
it.
lot more than that now.
She's got a lot more than that now, and she's not saying anything mind blowing. But again, for if we're going to assume that the majority of men are blue pill and they simply just want to look at a beautiful woman re-articulate their thoughts or validate their concerns, then of course, right? It's to your point. It is a money grab, but again, I hope those women are careful to pay homage
Yeah.
to the male spaces. And I think from where I'm sitting, the best way to pay homage is to spread that message to the masses as opposed to simply providing catharsis for men, because that's all it is. And I think that ends up just being stagnant, right? Like we have to move past catharsis. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah.
So a couple things, and I interviewed Melanie also, and we had a good conversation, and she said some real stuff. I actually found I'm usually a pretty good judge of, post my blue pill days when I was basically totally enamored with physical appearance and
Right.
seemed to not be able to. Okay. So once I got past that,
right.
I've become a pretty good judge of character, and in our conversations, and I tend to press and ask questions. It's not confrontational, but if I find something interesting or an opportunity for someone to clear something up, like
Sure.
earlier in our conversation, the white supremacy and black folks taking responsibility for their own, activating their own agency, as it were. And I found her and Chantel, especially Chantel, to be genuine. And it seems as though she's learning she's learning as she goes. Chantel learning as she goes.
Sure.
But I think a lot of people don't dig her. Also, she's Jamaican. So you don't get to talk to FBA women, So that's like that's the angle that they get in. But it's like, but all the stuff that she says is the same stuff. I mean, so it's not like the communities are that much different. So it's interesting. I think that those points are more. They have more effect if a woman says them to other women. It's hard to convince a woman that doesn't want to be convinced with a man talking these points. But if her girlfriend is saying that, then that's good. So from that perspective, I think it's positive. But I also understand why people have their spidey senses sort of triggered. It's like, she's pretty attractive too. I'm sure she knows that she's attractive. She does know how to use that correct filter as she's saying these points that she knows a bunch of thirsty dudes are going to be paying her to say. So I don't know. And also, I don't think that it is a particularly convincing argument that because someone is making money, that therefore that means, that they're any less genuine. I want to make money doing what I'm doing. I'm having interesting conversations with folks, and that's a priority to me. But I also want to be compensated for my time.
Sure.
So if anybody thinks that I'm doing this for free, no, I'm not doing it for free. That's not how that works,
I think to jump in there. I think That's interesting because one of the critiques I'm receiving right now, when I look at certain comments, when I look at I had a conversation on the phone with a young lady that I knew a couple years ago, and kind of like I talked about earlier, there is kind of a baked in suspicion of black men. Like we have to start the conversation there. Secondarily, like I'm being accused that I'm doing this to make money. And the reason why that's interesting to me is because um, if making money was the priority, there would be much quicker ways to do so. Primarily, if I wanted to exploit the largest consumer base, which is women, I would simply regurgitate talking points that they agree with.
Derek Jackson.
Dave Jack, God bless you. The fact that I'm not doing that, let's say that's not enough. Okay. Secondly, if I was doing this to make money, why would I stand against the SYSBM community? Even though you could make the argument they're a large part of my viewer base. But I've adamantly on several occasions said, I understand, but I'm not in support of that. Why would I do that? Why would I title an entire stream, "This channel might not be for you, please subscribe"? I mean, please unsubscribe. And the thumbnail of that was myself holding my daughter and then a picture of Marcus Garvey. So it was clear the angle that I'm coming from. And coming from that angle, not being a Democrat or Republican, extreme right, extreme left, being centered, even as I'm talking about, like there being women talking to women and men talking to men, naturally, based on my content, I would sit somewhere in the middle of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yet and still, this baked in, and then the suspicion of, oh, he's just a Nigerian trying to make money, or he's just a non-FBA, he don't believe none of this stuff. The baked in suspicion of black men, unfortunately, it affected us too. And black men are suspicious of one another, and we don't talk about that.
Yeah. And I hear what you're saying as far as there's other ways to make money. You can make money faster. I actually kind of liked Kevin Samuel's approach to that, where he just said, look, I expect to be compensated. I want to become very wealthy. I want you to get what you want. I want to get with, and by that, I'm going to get what I want. And I think that because of this suspicion that you're talking about, often it is the case that we are hesitant to just put that on Front Street, just to say, hey, I enjoy what I do, but I'm making money doing this. This is not a free. This is not a freebie. I do want you to support the stream. Get in the super chat. Here's my Cash App. Let's go.
Yeah. Well, again, like.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna kind of make the point that there's a reason why I don't have the sound effects. There's a reason why I don't play obnoxious music until I reach a certain level of likes or number of Cash Apps or super chats. Now, I'm thankful for those things, but primarily what I'm trying to do is greater than however much money I can make. I work in tech. I'm good. I want to make it clear that I recognize I'm not dumb. I'm not, daft. I recognize that this is a potentially lucrative opportunity. However, that was not my principal reason for doing this.
I get it.
You see what I'm saying? And it sucks. It sucks, and it kind of hurts as somebody who doesn't. If you can watch some of my streams, I might mention, hey, super chat once. I might look at super chats a couple of times during the stream. I turned the chat into members only. right? So I'm prioritizing the conversation and the work that's being done there. Now, again,
Right.
part of that suspicion is, oh, he has ulterior. Is he trying to reverse screw us or like play with our mind? No, it's nice. Thank you for helping me. This helps get me this mic. You know what I'm saying? But what I'm trying to do is greater than however much money I can make. Now, I'm not unaware that yes, it could be potentially lucrative. But that's when I look at this board, um, I have goals. Like I'm trying
Right.
to create a card game around these conversations. That could be a money making opportunity. I'm trying to do a documentary around conversations and particularly the divide between black men and black women. That could be an opportunity. But again, the money part is secondary. Like I still have to take care of my daughter, sure, but I just want to make it clear for me, unlike maybe some other content creators or ones that we're familiar with, the money part is I don't have consultations. I don't, there's no booking. You know what I'm saying? Like
Mm.
it's just me. I don't have a manager. I don't have somebody who emails other, like I get emails sometimes. Hey, we need to talk team. It's just me, you know. But again, that suspicion is something that regardless, you still have to
Well,
deal with.
well, in my mind, at least when I watch your content, it's obvious to me, and when I watch anybody, it's obvious uh, what their motivation is.
Mhm.
If your motivation was just money, the kinds of questions, the kinds of introspection that your content is full of, uh, and just attention to detail would just not be present because it's
Thank you.
you have
Thank
to
you.
you again to that thing that we were saying before. Uh, when you're pursuing a particular thing, it's usually
Mhm.
at the detriment of something else that you're pursuing.
Sure.
You know,
Opportunity
I
cost.
mean, you can't. Right.
Right.
You can't really assertively, aggressively be pursuing things like
Mhm.
that. And while also doing this other thing. So I mean, it's obvious to me that this is something that is actually done because you uh, is because of the work, the value of the work, and you know, and that's the same thing with the stuff that I'm doing. You know, I just enjoy
Absolutely.
having conversations. I believe that every problem, the beginning of solving a problem, is a conversation.
Absolutely.
Everything.
Absolutely.
Conversations are of critical importance, and I am willing to go wherever the conversation goes, and at least I'm willing to have the conversation. So,
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely. There
anyhow,
was
man, it's
no, I just wanted to say this last thing. So when in
sure.
college, when I decided to attempt to found an organization. Now, what's interesting is a buddy of mine. We're still friends to this day. He's actually the reason why I started We Need to Talk because at the time my grades were terrible. I didn't think they would let me start an organization. However, um, I had a philosophy class at the time, Dr. John Moore, uh, white man, but he really inspired uh, my academic approach or utilitarian approach to dialogue. Right? He recommended this book, short book by David Bohm, and David Bohm, ironically, is a theoretical physicist, so he has nothing to do with dialogue, but he wrote a book called On Dialogue. And he once said, suppose we were able to share ideas freely without the need to kind of like damper our views. I'm butchering the quote, but he was a fan of people talking frankly to get to the core of their issues and to be able to properly explore and express their perspective on life. So that's kind of where this started, and that's kind of what has grown into what we see now. But ultimately, I want to state it for the record: I want to see black men and black women together. in productive relationships. Now, you know, as a person who pontificates and considers Gen Z and even my generation, the millennials, I don't even know if that necessarily means marriage. I would love for that to be the case. But moving into like these next few generations, I just want us to be healthy and productive. If we decide to be parents, even if we decide not to be together, we're prioritizing the future of this child. We're prioritizing a healthy and productive relationship amongst ourselves. And unfortunately, because of some of the vestiges and some of the fallout of this generational trauma, we're incapable of entering dialogue with each other in good faith. And that's literally all I'm trying to help dismantle. And I just kind of wanted
Yeah.
to make that clear for, people are wondering, okay, what's his dog in this fight?
Yeah, I'm also pro black love.
Yeah, that's right.
um, and I mean, my parents are still together, 53
Mm-hmm.
years in marriage, um, and I'm an advocate of marriage. I have frequently said that the two things I believe that would almost fix most of the issues in the black community almost overnight would be abstinence and arranged marriage. Um,
I can see that.
so,
I can see that.
yeah, and I'm looking at this book, this David Bohm on dialogue, first
Yeah.
chapter on communication, second
Mhm.
chapter on dialogue, third chapter on, let's see here. Oh, very interesting.
Mhm.
Third chapter on,
I think it's interesting they made a distinction between dialogue and communication. I thought
yeah,
that was interesting.
the nature of collective thought.
Mhm.
That's interesting. The problem and the paradox, chapter 4. Yeah, this is interesting. Chapter 5, the observer and the observed. Yeah, I think I'm gonna check this out. This is cool. Suspension, the body, and propitiation. What is it? Proprioception. Okay,
Yeah.
that's a good one.
He's
Okay.
a theoretical physicist. Like I said, he shouldn't even be talking about talking, but he is.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Good stuff. Yeah, so I'm gonna check this out. All right, man. Well,
absolutely.
of course, I'll link your information and stuff in the description of this video.
Mhm.
Um, any final words?
Yeah, listen, I want to thank you, man. This ironically, as somebody who has dialogue and has conversations, I don't very often have good ones, particularly when people interview me. Right? I'm not going to call
Mm,
any names, but this is definitely one of the best interviews that I've had, and I want to appreciate you for that. And I think um, if we continue to showcase this type of communication, I think we can drastically change the paradigm of Black men, Black women, and the Black community. So I want to recognize you and appreciate you for that. Thank you.
thank you. And if you'd like me to reciprocate in any
Mhm.
way, I'd be down for that. And
Absolutely. Okay.
also, I think having you on the panel show in particular,
Mhm.
that show has a mix of folks, the real Dana, LAR movement,
Mhm.
Bernard Riley, Ramil Amir, Chantel Simone has been a panelist on that. Of course, Ike Ogiami, and he actually is the one that is the moderator. But then Donovan Sharp
Mhm.
has been on.
Mhm.
Mr. Palmer, he's supposed to be coming on. So it's a mix of folks, kind of
Right.
from the space, but we talk on a variety of topics that are not necessarily relationship based. I mean, most of them are
Mhm.
not. So, for instance, last week we talked about we kind of conducted a postmortem on the jab, if
Mhm.
you understand what I mean
Mhm.
there.
Mhm.
Um, and so we'll talk on topics like that. We talked about R. Kelly of course, the verdict and stuff like that. So we'll talk on topics like that. I think your perspective would be very, very welcomed, a great addition. So
appreciate that.
So if you're available, I'll reach out.
just let me know. Just let me know.
And I will be seeing you later.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Take care.
Have a good one. Peace.
All right, man.